He says, I haven't seen much on the podcast and forum on juniors. He says, we signed up my middle school age daughter at the start of the year to help her reach some racing goals, and results have been exceptional. My normal work schedule is regularly 48 to 96 consecutive hours. So our riding time is really consistent and depends on me being really inconsistent, forgive me, and depends on me being physically present. With TrainerRoad, I can see her workouts and we can chat or text about it afterward, and while being able to provide a good routine for her. My concern is that I'm not using the platform to its max potential. And on the other side, she's so young, I don't want to create burnout. And that's really the point that we want to focus on with this question right there at the end is the burnout aspect of things. So he says, would you mind discussing strategies for successful training with kids and juniors? How do we as parents and coaches get the most out of, forgive me, their time on the app? And are there any training pitfalls to watch out for compared to an average adult TrainerRoad user? So we're going to try really hard to speak from our own experiences here instead of telling parents how to parent, because we all know nobody likes to be told how to parent their kids. So instead, what we'll try to do is try to talk about our experiences. But maybe the first thing to cover really quickly, some things with the app. It might be like the better thing, and this is a common thread throughout, right, Nate? But keep things fun. If your child's like, I want to do disaster every day, you have wisdom as a parent to know that that might not be a good idea, even though they have all the enthusiasm in the world. And I experience this a lot with my son. He has the enthusiasm to do 10,000 things, but I have to look at it and say, okay, as an adult, even though I totally want to see him fulfilled and happy and doing all these things, it's a tough balance for sure.
Yeah, I want to. I'm going to jump just a little bit in the doc because I just want to say this part because it's very important. So there's a famous book called Training Periodization written by Bompa. I think that's how you say it, Bompa, his name. But his advice is, I'm not giving advice, I'm just saying his advice, is you start general in team sports as a kid. And then as they get older and their desire increases, you go more to like a solo sport. So they might play soccer when they're young. And then if they want to get more into swimming or running or something like that, where like track and field, where it's a solo sport, that can happen, and that leads to less. When in my experience, what I've seen, and I actually was I was in a car ride with a high school track coach who got like state champions. Is not all programs do this, but I think the bad ones, the bad and good at the same time, what they do is they throw tons of volume at everybody, and they see who sticks against the wall. So for like running, we're doing 60, 70, 80-mile weeks, and whoever is going to be able to handle that is now going to automatically be a state champion. But you leave this wake of like juniors who hate running and will never run for the rest of their life, who get stress fractures, develop like eating disorders because they're not as fast as the other people. It's not trained like individually. It's just trying to see who is the diamond. I think out of all of us, Amber, you are obviously the biggest athlete as a kid. Did that happen in swimming too? Did you ever see that?
Yeah, I was going to just say exactly that. I think swimming in particular, because it requires such a huge time commitment, this is a real potential pitfall. And I did see this happen when I was growing up, but I was really lucky that I was in a program that understood this and really took their time with their athletes. So, and what I've come to believe, after years of being in sport and seeing a lot of people come into the sport, fall in love with it, maybe even be really talented and then burn out as a result of exactly this. As coaches, it's really the coach's job to teach skills of resilience, not to test kids to see who already has it. And I think that's a huge misconception, is that you're either born with this toughness or not. That is baloney. This is a skill that you can learn. It's a skill that anyone can learn. And coaches' jobs are to cultivate, develop, and teach these skills, not to, throw everything against the wall and see what sticks. There's so much, it causes so much devastation, honestly. And you could be developing a lifelong love of sport, of movement, of good relationship with your body. All of those things go out the window when you do that. So I was really fortunate in the sense that the program that I was in was very much about quantity over quality. They focused on process. So I fell in love with a process, and that enabled me to have really sustainable long-term motivation for sport in general. I mean, look at me, I'm still here. But and that doesn't have to be the goal, but the nice thing about focusing on process is that's also transferable to everything else in life. So that was something that worked really, really well for me as a kid. And I saw other programs where they were just throwing tons of what we called junk miles in the pool at the time at swimmers at very young ages. And yeah, it burned them out when it didn't necessarily need to. And those very swimmers could have learned those skills of resilience, that could have learned how to engage in and find joy in process. And they never got the chance. And I think that that's just tragedy.
Yeah. And it's so true. Like, you're still here, but like, I'm still here too. And so honestly, how many kids in these programs are going to be pro athletes? Probably not many. And the ones that do have the genetics, because you have to have a certain type of genetics. You can't just have anybody be a pro athlete. So you do the genetics, and then they have to have the desire and the grit. And if you go for the more long-term, the slow, the kids that do have the desire and the grit, I think and the genetics, they will get there if they learn the resilience, right? And then they have that desire and they will automatically get there. They don't need someone to do it. But on the opposite, you see people who are fantastic pedigree, VO2 max and like genetics. And then at 21, they drop out of the sport because they hate it, because they've just been pushed their whole life as hard as possible. And they have all this stuff. So with my kids, I don't think they're going to be pro athletes, but I just support them. And I would like to make them, they don't burn out or develop any unhealthy habits. But I was, when I was in Moab with Lee McCormick, he was talking how he taught it was like a dev program. And he said all he did was he focused on skills, being smooth and fun. He said he never once mentioned winning a race, but they won almost all of the races. So I want to say this aspect of like, you can still be competitive and be awesome. And we talked a little bit about choking too. These kids are focusing on the process, right? They're like, ooh, here's a sideways hole. Let's get some tasty gnar in here. Ooh, I got pitted, right? And they come out and that's what they're thinking, rather than like, Lee says we have to win. Lee says we have to win. Lee says we have to win. That's in their head. And they're smooth over the course and they're really fast. And I think if you can have people develop that way, then you get like that competitor that Amber is and the genetics, then they're like, ooh, they're having fun while they're doing it. Every time they ride their bike, they're having fun, right? And then it goes up, up, and up. And then you get an Amber or an Alex.
Yeah.
Sorry, Alex.
I
forgot
when
you're
I was
here.
I was going to say,
quiet.
from a mountain biking point of view, that's totally how I approach any juniors who ask for advice, because we have that advantage that there is the descending aspect, right? For mountain biking, it's like getting up the hill is just half or less of the race. So it's like focusing on skills and things that they can see is super fun, whether it's like learning how to wheelie or, learning how to jump a gap or, riding that rock garden. It's like they're goals that aren't so much fitness oriented. And I guess my, not issue, but I think there's a disposition to trying to find the next pro athlete in all sports. And it's like cycling is unique, I feel like, in the fact that people cycle long after they tried to go pro or whatever. It's like it's a lifelong sport where it's like most of the people that watch basketball, I would argue, don't play basketball. So it's like I think there's a longevity aspect here and just making sure the kid's having fun. It's like if they want some structure in there, I think that's great, But to Jonathan's point, obviously I can't speak to having kids, but I think just throwing in, a little bit of structure maybe once a week, So they're looking forward to it every Saturday. Like, oh, sweet, I nailed the trails. Now I get to try this workout, which is another aspect of it. But never making the goal to win, making the goal to have fun and enjoy it and like check in with them. It's like, are you still enjoying riding your bike? And it's like, sometimes it takes someone asking you that about something when you realize like, nope, it's just my routine.
Yeah. It also depends on the age, right? It's different if it's a 12-year-old versus an 18-year-old. An 18-year-old, they might be totally focused on winning, right? And that is their desire, and they're old enough to handle that. And but a 12-year-old might be focused more on fun, and it's an evolution inside of that. The other thing, I forgot. Sorry. concussion. Go, John.
Yeah. When I was a NICA coach for a composite team in our local area, we started out with the kids and I was like, what do you want to do more of for training? Do you want to ride and go outside, do skills, that sort of stuff, or do interval training? And they were like, interval training, we want to get faster. And they knew, that I was with TrainerRoad and everything else. And I was like, okay, like, it's like, if we're going to do that, that's a lot of commitment, that sort of thing. Tried to explain it before. And they're like, let's do it. And it was after like week 2, they were like, can we just go outside and ride? Like, so, cause they were like, this is really hard work, just, doing these intervals. And it really got to a point where I realized in that moment, cause I was totally green as a coach for kids, that sometimes kids have all the enthusiasm in the world to do something, and you have to give them room to be able to explore that enthusiasm. But you can't be so adhered to it that you're like, well, you're stuck to it now. You're just going to keep going with this. And then also you can't lose your own perspective, because it's easy in that scenario. Like, let's say you get into a situation where the kid really starts interval training, sees a lot of improvement, everything else. There's a temptation to definitely let it go too far. But what we did as NICA coaches, it was really fun with the group, is instead, I thought, well, how can we do intervals, but do so in a totally sneaky way? So instead, what we would do is we had relays where basically everyone had a different leg on a team, and we'd have a short route that we would do. And everyone would sit there and wait. And then it would make it so that you would have to do we'd do 3 laps on the relay course, and everyone would rotate their position or something. We do fun things like you'd have to find something that would be hidden at a specific trailhead, and 3 different spots. They'd go and find those things, and they'd have to bring them back or meet up with other teams. There's so many things that as an adult, we don't have time to do because we're so time constrained with the different responsibilities we have. But as a kid, you do have time to do that. And for all of us, it would make training a whole lot more fun too. It does when we're doing those sort of things. So if we can have the foresight to be like, hey, maybe we can do something extra special and extra fun for junior athletes, I think that's a key thing. And I know, Alex, you raced in NICA, and so you went through that whole process of keeping it fun. Amber, I'm sure that through swimming and everything else, did they integrate games like that to keep it fun? Did they do that sort of a thing?
Sharks and minnows.
Yeah, sharks and minnows. Even I remember I had this wonderful assistant coach in college, and he brought out those toy torpedoes that you throw around under the water. I don't know if anybody's seen that, but they are a lot of fun.
Those things are so rad.
They're so rad. And he brought them to workout one time, and he's like, all right, guys, just play around with these. And we're like, really? But he made a really good point, which was when you play, you learn because your brain is open and receptive. And by playing around with these underwater torpedoes, we actually learned how the weight distribution, the balance of gravity and buoyancy could actually create acceleration through the water. And it actually helped us improve our streamlines, because you can manipulate the buoyancy of your torso with your lungs and all the air in them with the weight of your legs and the lower half of your body to create acceleration. Mind blown. But you don't really think about that unless the fact that we were just playing around with these toys in the water, it opened us up and made us more receptive to oh wow, check out how that thing moves. Can I move like that too? And making it into a game actually made it easier to learn some cool new concepts like that. And again, so much less stress, so much more fun, so much more engaging. So there's a lot that you can do around that for sure.
Yeah. One last thing I remember I was going to say, it's based on what Alex said, is that the gift that you can give your child is a lifelong sport and hobby, something that they can enjoy, because cycling's so unique that people do it in their 70s, right? They can do it their whole time. Although it is, relative expensive to something like running, it is so much better on the joints for long-term health. And it's really it's a gift of health, right? Because that's what cycling is. We don't talk about that a lot on the podcast, but we are increasing our longevity by, as long as we don't do this, crash on the mountain bike, but the amount of time you're going to live, because your cardiovascular system, your body composition, you're fighting off all these cancers and all that sort of stuff by cycling. And if what a great gift to your kid, right? Where the opposite would be, you burn them out from any sport and they don't want to do any sport for the rest of their life, which we see. You probably have some friends who did either D1 college or really competitive high school, and they will never work. They don't ever want to see a gym in the rest of their life because they had such a bad experience.
Yeah, I think another. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jonathan.
I just wanted to hit on motivation as kind of being that very thing, because so I face this personally. Like a lot of people, I get messages on my Instagram all the time whenever I have like videos, Simon and I riding our bikes around. They're like, oh, he's going to be so fast, or, oh, he's, you know what I mean? That's like what everybody says, because he started riding bikes when he was really young, but he doesn't have any goals. Like he doesn't even really like riding bikes that much. It's Legos are like way cooler than riding bikes, you know, for him.
It's like Nationals 2032.
Yeah.
He's got like it on his wall, National 2032.
Exactly. Yeah. I got a stopwatch. I pull him out of bed. Yeah.
He's got a taper plan. I'm gonna peak.
Yeah. Don't peak too soon. But it's like the motivation for him isn't there, right? And don't get me wrong, as like a dad, I wish, and as a coach, you could find yourself in the same situation. You could wish that all your athletes had just peak motivation all the time, but that's not real. Like, and you can't force that upon somebody for sure in a coaching athlete scenario, certainly of course, also in the parenting thing. It like that's the hard thing, right? With motivation, Amber, is because you are teaching kids when they're in a coach scenario. But are you actually like teaching them motivation? And you being an athlete that was coached for so long, I'm sure you have some thoughts on that and motivation itself and like those athletic levels.
I have a lot of thoughts on this, but don't worry, I'm not going to do a deep dive tonight or today. No, but I exactly that. And this dovetails really nicely with what Nate was saying. I think another lifelong gift that really is transferable to everything outside of sport is to learning how to be a steward of your own motivation. And this is something that plays out in the psychological research, which is motivation is intrinsic. It is innate. We all have an inherent sense of motivation. What ends up happening is not that you lose motivation, it's that we impose barriers to motivation upon ourselves, or others impose those barriers upon us. And some of that is cultural, some of that is relational, but it's less about creating motivation and more about removing barriers to motivation. And this was something that my early coaches in middle school and high school really did a wonderful job of, was help me identify motivational sticking points. And they supported me in learning how to steward my own natural motivational flow. So they weren't there to push me. They weren't there to motivate me. And likewise, you know, it's funny. I got up at 4 a.m. to do morning practices for swimming when I was in high school. And I really loved it. And my parents never pushed me to go. They never forced me to go. In fact, if anything, they would be like, really? Like, are you sure you don't want to sleep in? It's finals week. And I'd be like, no, man, are you kidding? If I don't get my workout in, I'm not going to be able to focus. I loved it. And there was no one pushing me. And instead of, I think there's a sense that, you know, people who are really motivated, you know, they're really pushing themselves. No, it's allowing. It's not pushing. It's allowing. It's removing barriers. And I'll tell the story of my parents and my experience. Like, my parents were wonderful. They did come to all the swim meets. You know, they volunteered to do timing and all of that. But it didn't matter. My mom reflects back on it and she's like, yeah, if you finished a race, if you were smiling, I was smiling. And if you weren't smiling, I just gave you a hug. Like, there was no pushing, there was no pressure, no nothing. And, you know, now looking back, my dad actually has pages and pages and pages of all of my race results. And I didn't even know it at the time because they were just there for me. They were just there to support my own motivation, my own process. They let me lead. And I think that made all the difference in the world. And I think I encourage everybody listening to think in terms of your motivation, not as something that you need to build up or produce. It's there. It's more about peeling back the layers. Like, what are the things that are preventing you from tapping into your natural motivation? Those are the things that you focus on, removing barriers as opposed to trying to build that up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's like,
great point.
Great. We're all going to say, sorry, we're all talking at the same time. A key there is, like, do your parents come and watch you? Because I think per the kid, it is different. I think my parents listened, but they didn't really watch many of my sports. They just dropped me off. And I love that. That allowed me just to do my thing without anybody nitpicking me or watching me. But other kids are like, they feel so good when their parents are watching. So I want to just, John, did you have your parents go, and did you like it?
yeah, between motocross and ski racing, I raced like a lot, right? That was always what I was doing. And my dad in particular was always there. And it's really like a special relationship and a bond that we have is over like my competition and my racing. My dad's like my what's the guy from Rocky, the guy in the corner, so to speak. Like, I mean, that's my dad. He's in my corner at all times, and he was really good with that. I can't ever remember a single time when my dad was trying to force motivation upon me. He would try to set the scene for me to be able to peel layers back. He would do so in a way that was like very much putting it in my wheelhouse. He was always really great too at seeing like he's always like searching for ways to make himself even more useful. And when he's in those scenarios, and he is always really good at helping me run through a pre-race check and routine and helping with that sort of stuff. He was never pressuring. I was really fortunate for that. Motocross in particular, because of the huge high investment, and then I think also high risk and the stress that comes with that for a parent. It's known for having very intense parents that are, like the Pop Warner Papa sort of a thing taken to the next level, because your child's also in a life and death scenario, and it's also causing you to mortgage your house because it's so expensive. So it's a bad mix. And just personally, because I know my dad's watching right now. Thank you, Dad. You were an incredible example for that, and he still is. And it's really special because he still calls me after a race, and he apologizes because he wasn't there at my race, even if it's in Canada or something. And he always asks me how it goes. He sends me text messages beforehand every time. So like, it's just it's a really special bond. And I know, because it's not like my dad is this endless fountain of patience, right? He's a human. And I'm sure that there were plenty of times where he fought back against the urge to push me harder, maybe. But he was a great example for that. So I'm really grateful for it. Alex, how about you? I mean, I know that you growing up, you had a close relationship with your mom and also your brother too, in that case.
Yeah. I think I just lost audio.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hold on one second.
Let's go with Amber. Amber, did your parents, you must have done a lot. They didn't fly to Europe for all your races, right?
I know my mom's listening too, and my dad might be listening. So I want to thank you guys too, because you guys were awesome. You were there for me. You were interested. You showed me that you cared, but you never pushed or got in the way. I honestly, I couldn't have asked for better parents growing up like that. I mean, just really, really awesome. Yeah. And it helped me instill this lifelong appreciation for sport and self-discovery.
Yeah.
I was going to
say, yeah, sorry. I was going to say, John's right. I was really close to my mom. My dad had a somewhat absent role in my life. So I think she struggled playing both sides of the fence, so to speak. She wanted to be supportive, which came very natural to her. But she also saw that when I finished a race and I didn't want to finish where I was. And she did it's great. I still love you. 15th is awesome, blah, blah. She saw my competitive side kick out, and I'd be like, Mom, what are you congratulating me for? This is nothing. And she would struggle with that, right? Because she wanted to be everything. And sorry, my dad passed away in April, so it was a little difficult for her to kind of play both sides of that sport. So thanks, Mom.
Oh, I'm gonna cry. What a great podcast.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. It's I know it's just bikes, but it's really it's a cool thing to have something that's in a common vein with your kid, and just a really special thing. So thanks for sharing that, Alex. And thanks Alex's mom for being an absolute hero. So appreciate that.